Good morning, colleagues. The rain has halted so that we can have the blessings of sunshine as we move through our panel discussion this morning. I welcome all of you to this morning's discussion, the public service working through the new normal. And to take us through our discussion this morning, I also welcome our three panelists, Mr. Charlie Brown, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology, Mrs. Yolan Howard, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Community Empowerment. I want to just pause to say at this time that we extend apologies to you for the absence of Miss Gail Atkins, our Director General in the Ministry of the Public Service. She is unable to join us due to some unavoidable circumstances. But at the same time, we warmly welcome Ms. Kim Bell, the Director of the Human Resource Policy and Staffing Directorate in the Ministry of the Public Service. I am Faye Marie Brown, and I will be your panel moderator. And joining us behind the scenes, the only other voice besides the panelists and mine that you may hear is our producer, Joanne Jordan, who is keeping us technically on point. Before we go any further, I would wish to ask you to join us in a moment of silence as a mark of respect at the passing of the Professor, the Right Honorable Owen Arthur, the 5th Prime Minister of Barbados. And that minute begins now. May he rest in peace and rise in glory. Amen. So let us chat about how we are going to manage our business at hand for this morning's panel discussion. We're asking you to comply, please, with our rules of engagement. Those of you who have been with us before, you are very familiar by now. We need to have the best bandwidth quality possible. So we're asking that you mute your microphone, you disable your video, try to minimize the distractions. We would love you to participate as fully as possible, focusing on the discussion and being able to listen so you can ask questions at the end. As we get to the end of the presentation, that's when we will open up for your questions and provide you with responses. So what are we discussing today? As we settle in the public service to a more permanent way of working alongside the COVID-19 virus and all of its presenting challenges, it is important for us to define what is this new normal and to have a clear understanding of what it requires from each of us. Hence, as we digitally transform, what does this mean? And what will it need or require from us? How will I be expected to work? Will it be business as usual? Or will there be some modifications along the way? And how do we literally and figuratively turn up for work? How can I lead others and be effective and productive at the same time? These are some of the many lingering questions that we all will have. And these are the questions that we are seeking to address in this morning's panel discussion. Our first panelist for today is Mr. Charlie Brown, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology. Mr. Brown has been working in the public service for over 29 years. And prior to taking up his assignment as Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology, he would have acted as Deputy Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of the Civil Service, as well as permanent secretary in that ministry. And he would have also spent some time in the Ministry of Education as its deputy permanent secretary. Most of us will know Mr. Brown as the director, the substantive director in the Office of Public Sector Reform. He has also held the post of a government development officer and was very instrumental in the development of the first ever e-government strategy for Barbados. So to help us answer these questions on what is digital transformation and the implications for us in this new normal environment, I warmly invite Mr. Charlie Brown to make his presentation to us over the next 15 minutes. Mr. Brown?
Moderator of today's webinar, Ms. Marie Brown. Fellow panelists, participants, good morning. Today my presentation will cover the following. What is digital transformation, technology and telecommuting, responsibility of public officers, and finally the role of the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology. What is digital transformation? When speaking about telecommuting or working away from the office, one needs to speak about digital transformation, which is one of the core mandates of my ministry, the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology. Let me first define what digital transformation is. Digital transformation is the integration of digital technology into all areas of government, fundamentally changing how you operate and deliver value to citizens and customers. It involves changing digital technology to solve problems. It's about transforming manual process into digital processes. And to add a little bit more about that point, it's not only about mimicking the existing manual process. You have to re-engineer those processes to make them more efficient. It's also about integration of digital technology into all areas of government. And it will change how the public service delivers value and services to citizens and customers. It will fundamentally change the way we do business in the public service, which falls in line with telecommuting. Let me give you an example of telecommuting at its best. During the curfew, the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology was asked to distribute emergency passes to those who require those passes to operate during the curfew period. The ministry did this assignment remotely. We did it not only remotely, we did it 7 days a week, 24 hours a day from our homes. So that just highlights the power of telecommuting, doing things differently. All right, let me outline some of the initiatives currently being executed by the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology. Firstly, we are about to roll out electronic documents and records management system. All of these programs are basically being funded through the international, the IADB, to the tune of $40 million US. The electronic document and records management system is currently being piloted at the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology. The next agency would be the Immigration Department, and then it will roll out to the remainder of the public service. The next major initiative is the digitalization of government records. We're in the process of identifying a site where we'll be digitizing the records within government, and then we'll be going out to various agencies within government to digitize their records. I think my officer, Hansi Strawn, would have outlined that in a previous seminar. In addition to that, we have rolled out a payment platform, Easy Pay Plus. Through this platform, Persons can pay for various services online. Currently, we have raised over, let me get the figure right, over $4.6 million through this platform so far. In addition to that, we're in the process also of rolling out the e-services platform. We've contracted a vendor through this program, through this platform, sorry. All of government services will be placed online and accessible to the public. And finally, we'll be also rolling out a human resource information management system. So you can see that the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology is a hub for digital transformation in the public service. Going back to telecommuting and technology requirements. Persons will need a reliable telephone and high-speed internet access service. Remember, we'll be doing a video conferencing, we'll be sharing files, etc. So having high-speed internet service will be critical. You also need devices such as smartphones, laptops, and tablets. You also need the tools to operate remotely. This includes Microsoft Teams and Zoom if you're doing conferences, if you're manipulating documents, collaborating. My preference would be Microsoft Teams. We're in the process of training staff throughout the public service using with the assistance of learning and development, and that's an effective tool for telecommuting. Any officer telecommuting, Microsoft Teams is an essential application. You also require a barbados.gov.bb account, which is a secure email account. It pains me to see public officers with Gmail accounts, Hotmail accounts, and conducting government business. So the requirement, one of the requirements would be to have a barbados.gov.bb account. An additional tool would be Cisco Java. Through Cisco Java, that's a call forwarding type application, whereby you can answer calls if you're at your desk. You might be on the beach, you might be on the road, you might be at home, but you can access calls from your desk using this particular application. And of course, there's web-based applications like Office 365 and on cloud where you can share documents, etc. And as I said before, we're rolling out EDRMS system, electronic document and records management system, which is filebound, which should be rolled out to every ministry and department within government. So what is the responsibility of ministries and departments? The responsibility would be to determine the technology requirements for the ministry. That would be done obviously with the assistance of MIS. They're also responsible for the provision of technology to support remote work. Actually, the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology, through the Public Sector Modernization Program, will be acquiring over 200 laptops for public officers so they can work remotely. This is full systems. This includes the monitor, the docking station, everything. So allow officers to work at their desks, and if need be, work at home or a secure location. The administrative department will also be responsible for set up security procedures for remote work, as well as set up security protocols for electronic documents. What is the responsibility of public officers? Confidential material shall not be taken out of the NDA, accessed through the computer at the alternative worksite unless approved in advance and rating by the PSR head of the department. No officer should move with confidential documents without sign off from the PSR head of the department. When I came into the service as a junior admin officer, what was told initially in my briefing, no files were to leave the office. We have to secure the information of government. So any confidential material being taken out of the office, both physical as well as electronic, must be signed off by the head of department. Electronic documents and records used or developed or revised while telecommuting must be copied or restored to the NDA's computerized records repository. That means that if while at home or in your alternative location, a document is created, that document must be saved back to the server within the administrative department so that that document is not lost if your laptop or device is stolen or anything like that. Procedures must be established to guarantee the protection of confidential information. Procedures may include a lot of secure workplace, computer access passwords, VPN connections, encryption, or restricted use of files at the alternative work site. All devices must have passwords, must be password protected. Reason being, if you don't have a password on your device, persons can come and access your files and your confidential information. You must also have protection, or if you want to access records from the server back in the ministry, a secure channel must be created via VPN. That is what a VPN is for. Because remember, confidentiality and security of information is paramount. That leads me to my other point. Employees should not access the government of Barbados network from unsecured networks. I think we all travel. You go to airports, where it is free access to the internet is offered. But one must keep in mind that unsecure networks, persons can take advantage of those networks and penetrate your devices. So the recommendation is only use secure networks, be it at your home or another environment where you have a secure infrastructure. And finally, lost or stolen devices must be reported to the ministry immediately. And this is for obvious reasons, because you have government information, the information must be secure. So you need to let the ministry department know immediately once you misplace your device, be it a phone, a tablet, or your laptop. Finally, what is the role of the Ministry of Innovation Science and Smart Technology? Firstly, you need to be assist in identifying resources to facilitate the work in public service. As the central agency in government, people would ask us for advice in terms of what systems to buy, that would ask us for assistance in developing security protocols, setting up VPN links. So that is the role and function of MIS. Secondly, provide technology infrastructure. As I said before, we're in the process of purchasing laptops, docking stations for various ministries and departments so that their staff can work remotely. We're also in the process of upgrading our data center. From that data center, we could securely save all the documents within government in a secure location. So we're in the process of building out our data center as well. We also have a help desk service. I think most of us are familiar with that. You can reach us at 535-1275, or you can report any issues related to your device, or if you have problems with your software, if you get locked out in terms of email, we can reset your passwords, we can do stuff like that. So we have a help desk where we can provide assistance. In addition to that, to facilitate telecommunicating, we are currently developing a number of policies as well. I think you're all familiar now with the telecommuting policy that has been out, has been circulated, but we're also doing one on cybersecurity, the acceptable use, you're bringing your own device. We have a social media policy that we're currently developing, an email policy, etc. What we are going to do is we can do a comprehensive document. We're not going to put out one policy. We're in the process of compiling one document which will have all the policies, which we will circulate shortly, probably within the next month or so that everyone will be au fait with what the policies related to these various areas. Um, and that is basically the end of my presentation.
Mhm. Thank you, P.S. Brown, for a very comprehensive presentation, starting with what digital transformation is, and then explaining to us what are the requirements for us as we, in terms of technology, as we seek to work remotely in the public service. This brings your presentation to give us a very clear understanding, as I said, of what digital transformation is. And I think we have an appreciation of how technology can be an effective productivity tool in this new normal environment. But colleagues, I wonder if we really have a full appreciation for what this new normal will be in the organism called the Public Service of Barbados. The Public Service is a unique organization. Some 24 or 26 ministries. We have well over 100 departments and well over 20,000 public officers, or just about. Rules and procedures exist for every transaction that we are expected to undertake. We have an overarching culture as well as a multiplicity of subcultures within each ministry and department. So let us look for a moment at what at this giant conglomerate of organizations called the Public Service of Barbados. Now we are guided by a vision that says to us that we are to be a model of excellence in innovation, service, and leadership. This vision inspires us to set examples in delivering excellence. It is a reminder of why we exist as a public service, why we made a career choice to serve our country. And alongside that vision, we have a very possible mission. Our mission tells us that we come to work to make a positive difference in the lives of our people. It tells us that we shall make this difference by delivering world-class services in a creative, innovative manner that is fair and honest. It tells us that we shall treat those whom we serve just as we would wish to be treated, and that excellence shall always be our hallmark. Whether you are a teacher, a policeman, a nurse, postman, clerical officer, admin officer, deputy permanent secretary, or permanent secretary. The reality is that our fellow citizens need us now more than ever, particularly in this new normal environment. We are called to make a difference in the lives of our people. And do we make this difference by following the values as outlined in our code of conduct and ethics? We are called to be professional, to serve with integrity and honesty, to be impartial and apolitical. So the big question for me now, and I'm not sure if you two share this question, but how can we maintain all of this in a new normal environment? Can a large public service organization be digitally transformed? Well, P.S. Brown has assured us that it can, but can it really be flexible in how it works? Can flexible working arrangements actually work in the public service? And how flexible can they really be? How flexible can we be? Now, to answer these questions, I wish to invite the director in the Human Resource Policy and Staffing Directorate in the Ministry of the Public Service to take us through these questions, managing the flexible work arrangements. Now, Miss Bell has been employed in the public service for approximately 22 years. She would have entered as an administrative officer too, and she subsequently worked to the post of Principal Classifications Officer in 2016. She was appointed at that point. Appointed admin officer two, and then promoted to the post of Principal Classifications Officer. She would have worked at several ministries, including the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Labor, but she spent the majority of her tenure at the Ministry of the Civil Service, now renamed HR Policy and Staffing Directorate. So Ms. Bell has amassed a wealth of experience in the field of human resource management, particularly as it relates to policy development, HR policy development. She currently serves as the director of that directorate I would have mentioned, and this is an office that she would have assumed in 2019. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join with me in warmly welcoming Miss Kimbell to take us through for the next few minutes on whether or not this animal, this organism called the Barbados Public Service can maintain its high standards, can achieve its mission and its vision in this new normal environment. Miss Bell, welcome. Miss Bell?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Sorry.
That is a mistake we all make at some point in time. Welcome to the panel discussion this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning, moderator, fellow panelists, and colleagues, fellow public officers. I am here to speak to you on these flexible work arrangements, and as the moderator said, whether these things can work, what they are, as well as how flexible can we be within, how flexible can these flexible work arrangements be? As a member of the Ministry of the Public Service for a number of years, as well as being as the director of the HR Policy and Staffing Directorate, this directorate, it is one of the responsibilities is with regard to setting of conditions of service for public officers. And therefore, one of these things that we will examine and are examining is the whole concept of flexible work arrangements. So I would go on to now move on to tell you, what do we mean when we talk about flexible work arrangements? Flexible work arrangements pertain to any type of work schedule that is outside of your standard working hours. And it also encompasses outside of your regular place of work for a specific period of time. And these flexible work arrangements, these flexible work options, you can have a combination of them, or you can have just one. They are suitable for any type of work arrangement. And let me just share with you that while we will speak of these different type of work arrangements, we should note that they are already found in various pockets within the public service. But given this new normal that we have been faced with, it brings into focus that these are things that we need to bring to the fore to look at in terms of widespread implementation. And also, they also serve in keeping with the vision and the mission of the public service, where we talk of being innovative and being better able to serve our clients. We also need to be mindful though, that as we look at these flexible work arrangements, that there are not readily implemented in every particular work environment, but where if they're best suited, they can be applied. But it always depends on the type of job that is being carried out. So we need to also consider the clients that we serve, consider the job that is being carried out, our customers, and whether the type of work arrangement will be best suited for that work environment. So as we go through, and as I go through with you, the various type of flexible work arrangements, I want you to bear in mind that while we can consider them and should consider them for this new normal, they may not always be readily implemented in every work environment, because we have to be mindful of what the job is and who we serve. And I'm sure you can think of, there are some jobs that the flexible work arrangements that I will speak to this morning may not be easily implemented. And these would be things like nursing and policing and the fire service and teaching. These work arrangements may not necessarily be an easy fit in those type of jobs. The work arrangements that we will go through today and that are being considered and can be considered for wider implementation are those of flexi-time, telecommuting, staggered hours, and compressed work week. And I'm sure that you know that we already work some aspect of these, as I said before, across the public service in various pockets. The compressed work week. This is where an employee works the usual number of hours, but in fewer days. So they're putting their work into this, this big block. And we have an example where you may work 4 days a week, you have your 3 days off. So you put in your 40 hours within that 4-day block. And I can think of one ministry who is already working a compressed work week, and that is at the Ministry of Transport and Works. And you would imagine that given the responsibilities of that ministry, there's certain activities that are best suited for a different type of work arrangement. And what that ministry did, they would have implemented the compressed work week for those persons who do the road markings. As you can imagine, that doing road markings can be disruptive to the flow of traffic. And that ministry would have negotiated, and it was agreed to by their staff, that they would start later in the day. So they start around 6 in the evening, and they work into the morning, the early hours of the next morning. And they compress their hours then Monday to Thursday, where they then have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off. So they're able to carry out their job in a more efficient and effective way, but within this compressed work arrangement. The next one that I would go on to talk about is that of flexi-time. And flexi-time is where the management and the employee agrees in terms of where they're going to begin and end the workday. The emphasis here, though, is on the core time, in that where employees must be present during that core time. And as in all work arrangements, you must work the mandatory number of hours that would make up your standard work week. Moving on from that, we have what is known as staggered hours. And with a staggered hours arrangement, this is whereby the employee, their begin and their arrival time and their departure time is fixed. So we have some examples here where the times will be 7:30 to 3:45, or maybe agree that is 8 to 4:15, 9 to 5:15. So your hours are pretty much set. And this type of work arrangement is useful for customers of MDAs where the contact hours may be extended. So for example, where you are a service-oriented entity, and you want to improve the service that you deliver, Then you may have a staggered system where you have persons working at different times so that you can then extend the hours of delivery of the service to later in the workday. But as I said, and it goes through for all of the arrangements, you must work your standard number of hours for the workday. The other one that we'll move on to is that of telecommuting. Telecommuting was thrust upon us because of COVID-19. And some agencies have been able to readily work within the telecommuting environment. This one, though, is a bit different to the others that I would have spoken of earlier, in that with telecommuting, as the name suggests, so you are not working at your fixed area, your organization, but you're able to work away from the organization, you away from the office. And as Mr. Brown would have indicated, you could be doing it once you're away at the beach, at home, wherever, but you're working away from your fixed, your office, the office space. And it allows the employee to perform their duties for a specified period. And the person, however, will be required to come into the office at least 1 day per week. And persons may question, but if I am working comfortably at home and I am producing, why is it necessary for me to come into the office? It is very important to come into that office space because you still want to be able to have that contact with your fellow colleagues. You still want to be able to share. You be having that face-to-face with colleagues. It helps to enrichen that work experience. In addition to that, it also allows you to have access to all of the things that you will need to work more effectively. So you may be able to do your research from your files. You have to come into the office to do that, because as we well know that we are in the process of digitizing, but many of our records are still in hard copy. So you're required to come into the office so that you can be able to do your research, to do what is required so that you can have a well-researched and put together paper, whatever it is that you may be working on. With telecommuting, it is very important that all of these things are in place. And as Mr. Brown would have mentioned before, he talked about the whole aspect of technology. So we asked the question, these flexible work arrangements, are they a right, a privilege, or are they discretionary? And I must say to you that, and I'm sure that you will agree, that flexible work arrangements are neither a right or a privilege, but they are discretionary. And why is it discretionary? Because any type of work arrangement, it requires managers to manage and supervise and ensuring that the operations are not compromised, delivery of service is not compromised in any way. So head of departments are required to evaluate and to assess whether the type of work arrangement that the employee may be considering, or even they themselves may be considering for implementation within their organization, they need to ensure that service will not be compromised and that the work arrangement would not negatively impact the operations of the organization. This work arrangement, or the work arrangements that may be considered by either party, there must be agreement on both sides. This is necessary because, as I said before, at the end of the day, managers are required to manage, and they need to ensure that what happens or what is agreed to will not compromise service delivery. It will not compromise the work that is to be done. So it is important that in any type of work arrangement being considered, that we're able to satisfy some critical, I call them critical requirements, and that is performance, technology, as well as productivity. We need to ensure with any type of work arrangement that those persons who are being considered for the flexible work arrangement, that the performance is satisfactory. As managers, and even as when you look at as public officers, you would know that those persons, and you can imagine that those persons who are productive and who perform well, when you can see them, when in most instances, and it's highly likely that when you cannot see them, that level of productivity and performance will continue. And when I say when you can see them, because we know that if we are doing a telecommuting, or if we are doing a flexi-time arrangement or a staggered arrangement, the direct supervisor may not always be there to manage and to readily supervise their team members. But it's very important that the performance be managed and be monitored in these type of arrangements. So it's important that we do our work plans, etc., that we can manage and we can see and we can measure what our employees are doing. So for those employees whose performance are below par and that they require performance, those employees, we would think that most managers will not readily allow those persons to have a different type of work arrangement, because those are the employees that we have to more closely manage. We have to more closely monitor their work activities. So they would not be the prime candidates for those flexible work arrangements, which require a certain level of discipline by employees. The technology is also a requirement, especially when we speak of telecommuting. And Mr. Brown would have gone through, P.S. Brown, he would have gone through the requirements for technology, because if we are going to be looking at and considering seriously, a head of the department is going to be considering seriously an application for telecommuting, he would need to ensure that that employee has the technology he has, the organization can provide them with the technology to work remotely. And we're not only speaking with regard to the computer, but also the security systems that will be required to ensure that the work of the ministry and department is not in any way compromised. With these type of work arrangements, the duration in that agreement would be set for a period of time, because with any arrangement, it's necessary to always do or to have a review. So in any type of work arrangement, we would want to put durations of say a 3 months or 6 months, where we will continuously monitor and determine whether the arrangement can be continued or whether we need to end it, or we may need to change to some other type of work arrangement that would more suit not only the officer, but the needs of the organization. And as we speak to, therefore, the whole aspect of meeting the needs and the flexibility of these work arrangements, well, we say that these arrangements are called flexible. They're flexible to a point in that we cannot always shift and change day by day, in that an employee comes and say, oh, today I want to work something and tomorrow I want to work something else, because we still need to have structure within the flexible work arrangements. Notwithstanding that, the flexible work arrangements also allow for emergencies. So where an officer may have or may have been agreed with their head of department that they will work a particular type of flexible work arrangement, if the arrangements are such that if an emergency occurs that may require an immediate change, because we're talking about an emergency, that there's room for dialogue, there's room for that officer to go to their supervisor, to call that supervisor, have that conversation and say, because of this situation is happening in my life, I would like to make a change. And one of these is, say, for example, a dependent being unwell. We would have heard or we know of those situations whereby public officers, they have a child or they have a parent that they look after, and that person becomes unwell for a period of time. It may be a day, it may be a week. And the practice by some of us have been that we will call in or we would ask for sick leave, but we know that we are not sick. It is already dependent that is not well. And in this type of arrangement, it allows you to seek the approval of your head of department to adjust your flexible work arrangement, whereby that you may want to consider for that period of time that your dependent may not be well, for you to work from at home, so you to be able to telecommute. So you are able, because your child may not be, obviously they're not well, so they cannot go to school. And so you need to be there at home with them, but you're still able to produce, you're still able to carry out your work activities in that space at home. So you're able to look after your dependent and still work without calling in and saying that you are not, or not asking for sick leave or even asking for vacation leave, because in that arrangement, you can still perform, you can still carry out your duties, but you just need to be able to do it in another space that allows you to be able to achieve the demands of your, or the what you are required to deliver for your employer, as well as to meet your at-home responsibilities, your at-home demands. So those are the things with regard to the flexible work arrangements, as I say, that are under consideration for this new normal that we are faced with. And I hope that we all understand that these type of work arrangements, they are not necessarily suited for every work environment, but they can be readily implemented in many of our environments, but they require all of us to do our part, managers and employees, with regard to managing the process, and us as employees also living up to our side of the bargain with regard to being productive and having a high level of performance. So I thank you for giving me the time to speak on flexible work arrangements within the public service and within this new normal that we are faced with.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. You have certainly given us a very clear understanding on how we are to manage within the framework of these flexible work arrangements. And certainly the role of managing these arrangements is a shared responsibility, a shared role between the head of the department and the public officer. So I want to thank you for shedding more light on how we are to manage these arrangements and manage ourselves. And the one thing that I would have gotten from this is that it certainly does not stop us from achieving our vision. So we can be flexible as a public service and still achieve the vision of delivering excellence, being innovative, and delivering excellent service. So thank you, Ms. Bell. Our final panelist, Mrs. Yolande Howard, is now going to take us through that aspect of the discussion which should allow us to reflect on us. How do we personally make the transition to function in this new normal environment? Now, Mrs. Howard currently serves as Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Youth and Community Empowerment. She has accumulated over 31 years of experience in the public service at middle and senior management levels, and has gained experience in the areas of research, project administration, and administration. She also has experience as a trainer in the areas of customer service, supervisory management, and human resource management, and has facilitated several of our orientation sessions for public officers. Over the course of her career, she has led the successful implementation of the National Human Resource Development Strategy, which was funded by the European Union. She was also a member of the Human Resource Development Advisory Council and the Board of Directors of the Technical and Vocational Education and Training Council, otherwise known to us as TVET Council. And she's also a member of the boards for the Barbados Vocational Training Board and the National Insurance Department. Now, most of us know Mrs. Howard very well, and we know that she has a passion for personal development. And so, Mrs. Howard, this morning we are asking you to give us some guidance as to how we make this personal transition, wherever we sit, at whatever level. How do we lead and how do we work in this new normal environment? Welcome, Mrs. Howard.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Brown. And good morning to my fellow panelists, P.S. Brown and Director Bell, as well as all public officers who are participating in this webinar. I'm very happy to be here this morning to speak to you about leadership, both in terms of how we lead ourselves and how we lead our charges within our organizations. Now, first, when we talk about leadership, we're not talking about management. We are talking about leading ourselves and leading people, which means that we have to develop and influence ourselves and others to be able to carry our tasks, achieve the objectives of the organization. Now, in leading, we have to be very conscious of the fact that we ourselves as leaders at every level of the organization are human beings too. We have our own personal responsibilities, our own personal commitments, our own needs, and our own weaknesses. And therefore, we have to be able to manage them. We have to be able to, one, admit that we do have them. We do have weaknesses, we do have vulnerabilities, we do have certain needs, and we have to be able to manage them in a way to ensure that we are able to find ways to overcome or improve where necessary. We also have to ensure that while we're doing this, we maintain high standards. One of the problems that I see in the public sector is that standards, values, and ethics, these are things that we are lagging and we are really not focusing on as much as we should. But as individuals, we need to start with ourselves. We need to be able to say, I need to set standards. If I'm going to be a leader, if I'm going to be a supervisor, if I'm going to manage teams, I have to set standards for myself. And those standards are general standards in terms of honesty, integrity, punctuality, timeliness in everything that we do, respect for others, respect for rules. And we have to ensure that we set those standards for ourselves so that we can therefore be able to function in a way that allows other persons to be able to be mentored so that they can also aspire to high standards. So looking at ourselves and assessing ourselves is extremely important while we identify weaknesses and vulnerabilities and help us then therefore to move to a point where we say, okay, there are standards I need to set for myself. And if we know there's a weakness, we don't give up. We seek to find a way to overcome that weakness and identify a standard that would help us to deal with that weakness. Now, as leaders in this dispensation, it is extremely important that we always ensure that we are accessible to all of our staff, whether it be supervisors or line staff, at the same time, respecting the chain of command. But during this time, staff members are going to have questions. During this time, there are going to be uncertainties. And therefore, we need to be able to be accessible to them in any way. During the COVID-19 shutdown, we were not meeting our staff in a face-to-face environment. Many of us used the various technologies, whether it be through WhatsApp, whether it be through email, with various meeting media tools to engage with our staff members. And it was important that we did it during that shutdown. One, to check in with our staff to make sure that they were okay, that they were dealing with the shutdown and they were following the public health protocols. Secondly, to ensure that persons were adhering to whatever agreed work plans were designed before the shutdown. Now the shutdown is completed and we are now moving towards a new concept of flexible work arrangements, which means that we will not see our staff members every single day. And Ms. Bell pointed out to the various types of arrangements that will exist. It does not mean that if we are not seeing our staff members face to face, therefore, we can still be accessible to them. We need to be able to ensure that we utilize the tools, whether it be setting up senior management WhatsApp group chats, general management group chats, utilizing the emails, utilizing the media tools. However we decide to do it, we need to ensure that staff members can access us as leaders so that we can deal with any problems, any challenges early and be able to resolve them. At the same time, staff members may just want to reach out to leaders and supervisors. It may just be to share information. That person, that officer may have just been able to solve a problem or been able to complete a task, and all that do is to engage a supervisor. We need to be accessible. And I do know staff members sometimes will complain that sometimes they do something, but they're not getting the feeling that a supervisor is not recognizing what he or she has done. We need to be able to recognize, or we need to make ourselves accessible and provide that open door, in inverted commas, so that persons know they can reach out to you to share those achievements, while at the same time sharing any problems, any challenges which they may have. That is extremely important when we're going to be leading ourselves. We need to make sure that we are able to do that. But at the same time, we also need to balance our lives. During COVID-19, I spoke to several colleagues who spoke about working from early in the morning to late at night. And that is really not the best way to operate. Yes, we know we had certain deadlines to meet. It would have been extremely stressful, especially for my colleague P.S. Brown and others who were deemed essential organizations. But at the same time, we have to ensure that we don't run ourselves to ruin so that we cannot be there for our charges, for our team members. So we need to balance our lives. And while this may seem harsh, sometimes we need to say no. Sometimes we need to prioritize. Not sometimes, really we need to do it all the time. We need to prioritize and we need to determine what is the most urgent, what is the one that is essential to the organization at that particular time. We need to indicate to staff what is also priority and what is essential, and then we have to determine those that are not. And there are times when we have to say, no, that is not what we're going to do now. No, we cannot meet now, because as individuals, we have to balance our lives. And the term that is used a lot is work-life balance. And it is balancing our work, but also balancing our personal life so that we ourselves can ensure that we're able to be healthy, both physically and mentally, so that we can deal with our responsibilities as leaders in the organization. We also have to be aware of all of the new relevant policies. Earlier, you heard PS Brown refer to various ICT policies which are being developed and which have been developed to help us to work in this new environment, in this new dispensation. And therefore, as leaders, we have to be conscious of all of those new policies so that we can properly guide and direct our staff members, and also guide and direct ourselves. Because if we are not aware of the policies and we don't know how to apply the policies, we cannot help our staff members. So we also have to be aware of all of the new relevant policies so that we are comfortable. If there are any questions we have, we seek out our colleagues and we have those questions answered, and then we're able to better lead our staff members. Now, leaders generally have a role to play. I referred to influence. There's a difference between a manager and a leader. A manager has all the strategies developed and knows how to deploy, knows how to identify the various resources, the money, equipment, etc. But a leader is the one who is able to influence the people in the organization, the most important resource to get things done, because an organization is made of people. The inanimate objects are tools that we use to be able to carry out our tasks and be able to meet our organizational objectives. So we are there to influence our people, understanding that it is through them that we are able to achieve those objectives and deliver our public services to our various clients across the country and beyond. At the same time, a leader also has to help staff to grow and develop, and that's extremely important. Whether an individual leader does it him or herself or through other leaders in the organization, it is important that you work at that. And at this point in time, we need to even more so, because of the new skills and tools that will be required in the new normal, we need to ensure that those staff members are able to grow and develop even within this new normal. Now, I indicated earlier that it is necessary for us to ensure accessibility. One of the concerns that I know I would have had COVID was that some managers were really not taking into consideration that with COVID-19, some persons developed fears and uncertainties. There's a change when there's new, fears and uncertainties will arise. And therefore, it is always important we maintain contact. I said it before in terms of ensuring accessibility as individuals, but it is important that we also say to our supervisors and managers that they need to do that, and we need to ensure that they do that. But while they are doing that, they have to be able to balance firmness with fairness and compassion. So yes, we ensure that our staff members, when they are seeking, for example, as Ms. Bell indicated, to apply to work in a new arrangement, that we are fair and firm in seeking to assess the request and to communicate with them the best arrangement which is suitable not just for them, but also for the organization. At the same time, to be passionate. The worst leader is one who does not know how to balance various leadership styles. This is not the time to be totally autocratic. We need to know when to be autocratic, but we also need to know when we need to bridge that and to integrate that with being democratic. And therefore, it is important that we do have that balance of firmness and compassion. But at the same time, when we are leading our staff, we need to ensure that we carry out whatever due diligence is necessary when we are making decisions, when we are assessing requests, when we are assessing any proposals which are coming from individuals or teams within the organization. So due diligence will always be important.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier, you would have heard the PS of the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology speak to the various tools, technological tools that are required. And as leaders, whether we be executive, senior, or low-level leaders, we have to ensure that our team members are indeed equipped to work remotely. And we have to develop a mechanism that helps us to understand what those employees are now equipped with and what they need. But not just in terms of the physical tools, but also in terms of the skill sets of each staff member. Right now, there's a Microsoft Teams session, training session going on now. It is important that we, when we receive information, despite the fact that information comes to us through a general email broadcast, as leaders, we need to then cue in with our staff members, communicate with them, make sure that they are opportunities, make sure that they understand the benefits of the training to them, and make sure they take advantage of the training opportunity. So therefore, we are not just here to say, okay, MIST asks us to find out how many laptops we need. Yes, we need 10 laptops, but we have not done our due diligence to determine what the officers have and what they actually need in a very strategic way, and then give them the equipment, and then we don't know if they can use equipment and use the various software packages that may be now used in the new normal. So we, as leaders at every level, we need to be able to carefully assess the needs of our staff members, carefully determine what is required to help them in terms of the training opportunities which are being made available through MIST and through the Learning and Development Directorate to make sure that they can operate in an effective and efficient manner when they are not within the general setting. The accountability of staff is extremely important at this point in time. There are a number of persons, I am sure, who are going to say, well, yes, flexible work arrangement. Yes, I think I want to do that so I can spend some time away from the office and at home. That's not the purpose of it. Ms. Bell very, very clearly explained what the purpose of flexible work arrangements are. But as leaders, we also need to emphasize and re-emphasize the fact that it is about productivity, it is about strengthening efficiencies, while at the same time allowing you to be able to deal with your personal responsibilities. So you have to be the one, along with your supervisory teams, have to be there to ensure that persons are accountable. And it means, therefore, that in every case, officers should understand their job descriptions, their roles, and the parameters within which they have to work. If you know your job description, if you know your role and you know your work plan, and it is all discussed with your supervisors, it means therefore the supervisor can say, this is what was decided and agreed in the work plan. These are your key performance indicators. These are the timelines, and therefore hold you accountable for maintaining the components within that work plan. Officers need to also be responsible And in this environment where we are not seeing officers every day, policy is indeed approved, officers have to be responsible. If you are going to be working away from the office and there is a task to be completed, then we as leaders have to ensure that officers are operating in within the parameters, rules, regulations, whatever guidelines there are, whatever policy guidelines there are, and they're operating effectively. We have to ensure that we do that. So it means, therefore, that we all have to sit down and agree from early, and we have to ensure that we are continuously monitoring what our officers are doing to ensure that they are held accountable and that they're performing in a responsible manner. Now, one of the things that I have recognized, and this is not one of the things to speak about, but I think it is important. In this new normal, even before we talked about flexible work arrangements, people have been using digital media tools in a way that is not really correct. And we as leaders need to ensure, in addition to what the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology has designed and is designing within its policies, we have to ensure that our staff members are utilizing the tools in a responsible manner. You have been told earlier about confidentiality. We have to also ensure that they know they're using the right tools in the right way. So it is not just about your work plans and your tasks, it's also about how you are communicating information as well. Now this moves me into the next item. I am not going to focus on the performance review and development system tool. PRDS is a tool. What is important though is how we use the tool. Performance. We have not been able to manage in the way that we should. But there are two very important things that we need to focus on as leaders when we are managing the performance of our staff members. There must, for us, we have to be able to set examples for our staff. One, we have to engender trust with our staff. And thirdly, and most importantly, we have to ensure that we communicate with our staff, both in terms of one-on-one communication, group communication, how we do things, because they got staff members watch leaders. They observe how leaders operate. Therefore, communication is important. And it must not just be communication every 3 months for those agencies that utilize the PRDS tool. It is about constant communication with our staff. Lower level supervisors and managers should be interacting with staff on a regular basis. Middle level supervisors, those at the top, you cannot always speak to all staff, but definitely the direct reports, communicate with them, and also ensure that you are getting the feedback, which is important to ensure that the performance is in line with the various standards within the various indicators and objectives. So communication is important, trust is important, and setting the right example, they are extremely important when we're talking about performance management. And again, I'm not talking PRDS, I'm talking performance management. We can have a tool by any name, but if we do not apply that tool correctly, we will not be managing performance. We will not therefore be ensuring that we are achieving the organization's objectives and by extension, the objectives for the country. So performance management is important. And during this new normal, we utilize the various tools that we have to communicate with our staff. If we agree on work plans early and we agree on our objectives, agree on our key performance indicators, then we have those conversations on a regular basis. And we monitor how they are operating. We check in with them, as I said before, something that I just cannot emphasize enough. Communication. We need to communicate with our staff members, and we utilize the work plans as our basis, as we should be well aware, and we communicate with them and deal with any challenges they're having, any problems they're having at the same time, so that they're able to complete every task effectively. So we should not use the excuse that we did not see the staff member, as I have heard. Well, so-and-so is working at home today, but hello, that officer can still be reached. Whether you send an email, whether you call, you can still communicate with your staff member. And let me add here that if we are going to be moving into this new flexible work arrangement, we need, as leaders, supervisors, managers, to ensure that staff members understand that while you're away from the office, you are still employed and you should still be in contact with your various supervisors. Those officers who work in the field right now as welfare officers, as community development officers, as statistical assistants know that. But all officers have to understand in this new arrangement that it is necessary for us to communicate with each other on a regular basis, and that they communicate with you when they're having challenges, so that those challenges can be managed as soon as possible. And that brings me into the very last one, identifying and immediately managing weaknesses. In a general situation or a traditional situation, we tend very often to overlook weaknesses. And many of you know exactly what I'm talking about. We have had officers over the years who have developed a reputation for being weak, and we would transfer the problem or we just ignore the problem altogether. But in this kind of new work arrangement with its various variations, with different variations, we need, however, to deal with the weaknesses. We can't just say ignore the weaknesses and don't seek to manage them. We need to manage them. Otherwise, we will not achieve the efficiencies that we're seeking to achieve. We will not be able to reach the productivity levels that we are seeking to reach. And therefore, it is important that we identify the weaknesses and immediately seek to manage them. So if there is an officer that, if this officer now seeks to want to work away from home a certain number of days, or work staggered hours, and it is not always in the office with a supervisor because of the staggered hour arrangement, and there's certain weaknesses, you should encourage that supervisor and work with that supervisor to deal with those weaknesses, so that that when the officer is working, that the officer is able to work effectively. I will wish to stress, however, that basic leadership principles will have to always apply in this new normal. It is important as leaders that we develop standards for ourselves. It is important that we assess ourselves. None of us knows everything. None of us has all the information and knowledge. We therefore need to ensure we assess ourselves and deal with whatever discrepancies or shortfalls or weaknesses that exist. We need to be able to admit when we're wrong and learn from our mistakes and help our staff so that they don't make the same mistakes. General, and it will apply in a new normal even more. We need to set the right example. And finally, we need to be fair. We need to be compassionate. We need to ensure that our staff members are equipped with what they need, and we need to be consistent in whatever we do as leaders. If we seek to employ these principles and to take note of the various idiosyncrasies that could arise in this new normal, a new flexible work arrangement policy for the Barbados Public Service will be successful.
And thank you, P.S. Howard. You have certainly spoken firmly on these matters and in terms of our behaviors, whether we are leaders actively supervising teams or from wherever we sit in the public service. I think what I got most from your contribution is that we are all leaders. So we are to see ourselves as leaders and to adapt our behaviors accordingly. You have spoken um, and made a passionate call for us to be flexible, for us to empower managers and supervisors, and for us to achieve balance, whether it be work-life balance or balance in terms of fairness, firmness, and compassion. I was going to make a plug for the training of persons who may not have the skills to operate the technology remotely, but you have quite ably done that for the Learning and Development Directorate and the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology. So thank you for your very passionate contribution. It is at this stage that we will open up questions. We will open up questions to our participants. Just thank you. Good. And this is how we're going to address this part. If you have a question, we're going to ask you to raise your hand. Now, in the chat feature, you will see a dialog box looking very much like what you're seeing on the screen now. And if you have a question, please tick the raise hand feature to indicate such. Our producer working behind the scene will unmute you in the order that the question will be taken. If, however, you do not have microphone and speaker ability this morning, it doesn't mean that you cannot share your question. We're going to ask you to type your question in the chat feature, and the Learning and Development team will ensure that your questions are also addressed. So we've had a very thorough discussion, I believe, this morning from all three panelists. You would have heard from Permanent Secretary Brown about this whole business of digital transformation. And essentially what we're doing is making the public service and the services offered more accessible to our customers through digital means. And he would have taken us through how we need to work remotely, the technology requirements to achieve this objective of transforming the public service digitally. We then heard from Director Kimbell, who addressed the issue of whether we really can be flexible, work flexibly as a public service, and she shared with us the flexible work arrangements, and she made the point that they are not new, that they're all in operation in pockets throughout the public service. And while they're flexible, she would have underscored the point that they're not flexible beyond flexible. So she would have indicated how they are to be used and how they are to be managed as we go through this new normal environment. And then, of course, wrapping it all up was Permanent Secretary Yolande Howard, who appealed to the leadership within each of us, whether we supervise teams or not. She's made a passionate plea for us to adjust some of our behaviors to ensure that we achieve the vision of this public service and its mission. And I wish to remind you that we're all striving to be a model of excellence in innovation, service, and leadership. So at this stage, I am going to pause and ask my producer whether we have any questions, any raised hands waiting for us, or can we assume that we were sufficiently clear and there is nothing further to be clarified?
Well, I have two questions, and Haynes D has the raised hand, so I will direct these two questions first, and then once those have been answered, Haynes D, I will allow you to unmute yourself and ask your question. The
Fair
first
enough.
question: is there a specific time option in which you can legally offer a flexi time for general admin staff? For example, no earlier than 7:30 a.m. and no later than 6:15 p.m.
Director Bell, would you please take that question?
Thanks for the question. As some of you may know, or all of you may know, we already have a flexi-time arrangement that is already in practice within the public service, which gives an early start time and the earliest start time, and the latest time that the day can end. However, as we look at the whole concept, and we know that as a country, we have been examining the whole concept of 24-hour workday and being flexible. I believe that there's also room for extending those hours, those begin start times and end and the finish times. Within that work day, there's room for that discussion, but we must always bring it back to what we said before in the presentations, is that the work arrangements, they must be agreed to. Mm-hmm. They must be agreed to by both parties. And what is paramount is to ensure that the work and the work of the organization is not compromised in any way. Service delivery is not compromised in any way.
Thank you. The second question, Joanne?
The second question: does the public service plan to permanently implement some of the aspects of the flexible work arrangements? And will the documents on flexible work arrangements be sent to ministries and departments?
Thank you once again for that question. The flexible work arrangements is a work in progress. And as with all policies, as soon as the policy has the relevant approval, and as we all know, that policy is set by approved by Parliament, as soon as Cabinet, not Parliament, Cabinet, as soon as the policy is approved, all ministries and departments would have sight of the policy, as well as all public officers would have sight of said policy. So it will be widely shared.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I have noted in the chat that we had a number of comments or questions, and I recognize the presence this morning of our GIS radio officer, Shayla. Good morning to you. And you said you would have posted in the chat, and I believe this is directed to P.S. Howard, that she would have noted that there's a difference between a leader and a manager, and how is a leader identified in the public service. And similarly, I think, Kim, you would have already answered the question about the availability of the flexible working policy, the document. So if Ms. Howard could just briefly address how is a leader identified in the public service, and then Joanne, we will go to unmuting the person that you have there waiting.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. It's a very interesting question that was raised by Shayla Merle, and I always smile because in the public service, we see leaders as those persons who hold the very senior positions. And we refer to them as the leaders. However, a leader is a person who is able to influence other persons and to help them to be motivated to do what they have to do, generally, yes? Or simply. So therefore, there are individuals who at any level, who may not even have a supervisory position, but demonstrates certain skill sets and certain qualities that lend towards being a leader. And it is through those persons that we can then help other members of our teams be able to achieve their objectives. So a leader, generally though, whether it is public sector, private sector, NGO sector, is any person who holds a managerial or supervisory position, noting, however, that all managers are not necessarily good leaders.
Exactly.
But a leader is an individual who has those specific qualities and skills where they're able to influence others. And I have seen it in persons who held low-level positions. And because of those qualities and those skill sets, they were able to take charge of certain activities and get them done effectively.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And Joanne, over to you.
Okay, Haynes D, I've asked you to unmute so you can go ahead and with your question.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My question has to do with management of risk, not only in relation to ergonomics, because we talk about working from home, and I'm sure that we are not applying the same ergonomics working from home as we are from in the office. And the next question related to risk is, how are we managing the insurance status of these pieces of equipment that are government owned, that we are now moving away from the office? Are we informing the insurance companies that we no longer have these pieces of equipment in a set area? We now have them in our homes where the risks may be higher.
Thank you very much, Ms. Haynes. P.S. Brown, can I ask you please to address that question, particularly as it relates to the insurance of equipment?
Yes, I agree with the officer that insurance is extremely critical. What organizations normally do before the estimates process is complete, they would contact the insurance provider, let them know what equipment you have, and then they will bill you accordingly in terms of the insuring the particular item. Um, right now, we are in the process of acquiring over 200 devices for agencies, and I would assure you, these devices will be properly insured.
Thank you very much. There is still, though, to be fair, the outstanding question of ergonomics. This, as we move to work remotely, this is a challenge for most of us, and it is something that I believe that we all have to manage as we work remotely. But any member of the panel, feel free to share your perspective on how this can be managed in this new normal. And we recognize that it would just be your perspective at this stage, as there's really not a policy position as yet on how this would be managed.
Mrs. Brown, if I may,
Sure.
I want to focus on the safety and health component.
Yes.
Ms. Haynes did refer to ergonomic factors. And one of the challenges that some persons have encountered while working during the shutdown has been the effects of working either at a dining room table or working in bed, not sitting or standing, because you can stand as well, sitting or standing in a way that allows for your neck and other parts of your body to be properly in place while working at a computer. And I think, yes, we do have a safety and health at work act in place. And I think the safety and health committees that are mandated within that act need to be brought into action to assist in developing guidelines, if you will, for agencies to assist officers so that they can work in a way that will not be allow their physical health, as well as the mental health to be negatively impacted. I can see how that can work for some persons when it comes to the ergonomics, but also there's a mental health component as well. And another thing, of course, which is a risk, is the fact that there are some persons who have either very young dependent or persons who are physically disabled and others who with health challenges. And sometimes I've heard it and seen it with persons who are working and the children are coming to them at the same time for help and this kind of thing, and they're embarrassed. But I think we need to continue to talk to our staff again about some of these things and to help them to manage them. And also going back to what was said before about confidentiality, the risk about confidentiality, if we follow what was said by P.S. Brown, we would be able to then deal with confidentiality. But I do believe that our safety and health committees have a role to play in dealing with some of the risks that can occur in relation to physical and mental health impairments.
Thank you very much, PS. I almost said PS Labor because I recognize that you would have been drawing from your years of experience, having served as permanent secretary in the Ministry of Labor. And to T. Kaiser, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I hope that Mrs. Howard's contribution with that question, the previous question, helps yours in some way. She would have recommended that our safety and health committees come to the fore. So this officer's question, P.S. Howard, takes a different direction, slightly related. She would have asked, should an employee gets injured while working at home, how will that be dealt with? And I think what Ms. Howard was saying applies in this situation. Ms. Howard, you can briefly give further guidance if needed. Mrs. Howard?
Yes,
Should we?
Yes, my battery was getting low. Yes, the Safety and Health Committee, yes, I think it is important. This whole thing about injury though, the way that our Safety and Health at Work Act is worded, it speaks about workplace, yes?
Yes.
And I think what we probably might have to do is to redefine the workplace.
Taking it
is at home and that officer is conducting a task which relates to that person's employment and is injured. I'm actually searching my brain trying to find an example. But if that person is working something as simple as maybe slipping because there is a cable from the computer, yes, it's how do we deal with that? I think we need to redefine what the workplace is. And I think we need to have our safety and health at work committee sit down and with the assistance of the officers within the safety and health section of the Labor Department, come up with various risk factors, do a risk management, because there are some things that we may not know that could easily happen. There are some general things that can happen in a home, yes, but there may be some things depending on the nature of the job that could result in a person being injured, or not just being injured, but also being impacted in some other medical way. And redefinitions and risk assessments are therefore necessary to be able to deal with any and all eventualities that could possibly occur.
Thank you. Now, Joanne has indicated that we have another question. And Joanne, can you go ahead and invite that person?
No, it's the question is, do you have to have a reason to apply for flexible working or telecommuting? For example, caring for a person, or can someone who feels they can work more productively or help balance work-home life be equally acceptable when applying for these arrangements?
Ms. Bell?
Thanks for the question once more. Given that, well, based on the question that was posed, I know persons have been linking the flexible work arrangements tightly around COVID-19 and what we were faced with and trying to manage within COVID-19. But let's go back to the mission and the vision of the public service, where it talks about being innovative and being able to better deliver service. And it's around that flexible work arrangements are built. So while in terms of, you may say to you may have a rationale for a reason for your supervisor to say to your supervisor that you would like to work this different type of work arrangement because of what may be happening. So you would have said you have a dependent that you want to be home with, or you you think it's best for you to work in this other type of work arrangement. Just let me say that the flexible work arrangements, and I go back to the whole thing, it is something that must be agreed upon. And if as an employee that you want to explore, or you think that it's best for you to work a different type of way, that is something that can be looked at. And I'm sure that persons they consider working differently because of, for their own reason, something that may be happening. They prefer to get to work at 7 o'clock because when most persons come into the office around 8:15, 9, when there's a lot of activity, that their concentration levels differ, they drop, or they prefer to work late in the afternoon. But I wouldn't say that persons, you need to, in your application, you need to state where you want to work that particular time. You put forward your application indicating that these are the hours that you would like to work. But we go back to, at the end of the day, is ensuring that there's productivity and there's no disruption of service. Mm-hmm. I hope that answers the question.
We also need to remind our officers that this is a discretionary arrangement.
Correct. Correct.
And therefore, based on your presentation, will be based on whether the organization, the nature of the work done in the organization lends itself readily to a flexible work arrangement, whatever it may be.
Correct.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Bell. There is one other from Sheila. Sheila is asking if there are any departments currently, quote unquote, trying any of the flexible work arrangements, and do they have to wait on the policy to be complete? Ms. Bell, can you share with us any examples you would have shared already that the Ministry of Transport and Works would have been using a compressed work week? We have certainly, we would have certainly been using flexi-time arrangements all across the public service for quite some time. Are there any others that come to mind at this stage?
So there are various, as I said, the one that is most commonly utilized within the public service is that of Flexi-time. Flexi-time would have been an initiative of the Office of Public Sector Reform a number of years ago. And so it is something that has been around for a while. So it's already in practice at various departments across the public service. As you correctly said, MTW, they do the compressed work week, and we were pushed into doing the telecommuting, and there's some offices that have continued with the telecommuting arrangement, and that being the Ministry of the Public Service. We have continued with that. And I will say to you that there's some persons that would have indicated that they do not want to do telecommuting. They prefer to work within the office. Some persons thought that they had to, and then they realized it. But when they had the conversation, this we were able to say to them, but no, you can come into the office more than 1 day a week, 5 days a week if you so wish, because while we are working within COVID, we the thing is to ensure that the work environment is safe for work.
Yes.
So all offices would have ensured that they have the appropriate in terms of space that persons can work safely. They're not so you have that 3 feet or 6 feet separation in terms of how persons go to lunchroom, and in terms of meeting up in those common spaces, the increased cleaning. So each head of department have that responsibility, and they are aware because there were cleaning protocols that were shared across the public service to ensure that all workspaces were safe for employees to work in. So saying that, I can't speak to, because obviously I don't know what is happening in every single department that is out there, but some of us have continued. Some are doing a combination in terms of some persons are doing flexi as well as the telecommuting, so because these are things that were already in place.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. And I note your comment, Shayla, that your department, in your view, is perfectly suited for the working remotely option, but that you're all in office. And that is why we want to stress folks that this is discretionary. At the end of the day, the head of department determines which one works, but the public officer can request that consideration be given to them working a flexible work arrangement by completing the relevant application or sending a letter asking for consideration of such. So that's all we want to share with you on that topic. I want to highlight a comment that was made by one officer in this discussion, who would have underscored the importance that change management plays in this area in terms of us working through to the new normal. And P-Bess, I really support your observation. And change management is not the business of only senior managers. It is the business of all public officers. So with that, I want to thank all of you. There was one other, I know I saw it, about when will the flexible work arrangement go to cabinet and when it will be approved. We just want to remind you that the policy approval is a process. And so therefore, we are unable to say with you exactly when approval can be expected. But as you know, it is, and I'm going to use some public service speak here, it's actively under consideration. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring this discussion to a close and to thank all of you for participating. To you, our panelists, I really want to express our appreciation for being here with us this morning to explore the new normal and what will be required by each of us. Remember, P.S. Howard says that in this transition, there will be uncertainties, but we are encouraged to work through our uncertainties and not to give up. P.S. Brown has urged us to embrace the technology as we seek to achieve the big objective to transform the way we do business in the public service and to transform digitally. And Ms. Bell has certainly showed us that we can indeed maintain our standards while we are flexible in our working arrangements. To you, the participants, I thank you. Without you, there would just be a panel and no panel discussion. So I thank you for being here. As we wrap up, I want to signal to you that the month of August is usually a heavily utilized period for vacation across the public service. And similarly, for us at the Learning and Development Directorate, we use the month of August for vacation, as well as to plan, and certainly we do refresh, but to plan and to prepare for the next period of training, which will commence in September. So you look out for the messages from us for all the training that will occur in September. I want you to know that in addition to webinars, we will be again producing some virtual training. So imagine the face-to-face training courses that you would attend being done in this virtual environment. I want to also invite you to view our YouTube channel. Just do a search in YouTube, Learning and Development Directorate, and ta-da, it will appear. There's all the webinars that we've done. Those recordings are hosted there. There's some course materials for those of you in our self-directed learning products. You will find course materials there as well. So until we meet again in this space, I want to encourage you to continue to be safe, to have a wonderful summer break, and to keep learning. I am Faye Marie Brown, and I have been your moderator today. With that, see you around, folks.